Good morning, USA. Good afternoon, Europe, and good evening, Asia. Welcome to the first Global Digital Get-Together and webinar. Very happy to have you all. Thanks for your attendance. And we have more than 300 registrations from 4 continents. Extremely proud of this. Thank you for joining this opportunity to update you about the DE-CIX COVID experience so far, what we have realized on our traffic development, the stats side, how we deal with the infrastructure, what our business continuity plan measures we have taken, but also very important is to share with you our assumptions, how our industry would get involved in the future with more products and more services reflecting the lessons learned out of these crazy times we are all in. At the end, guys, of course, you will get the chance to be very interactive, to get the chance to ask questions, and we hope that this will be a very positive discussion in a sense. We can exchange a lot of information and see how we can deal together as community in these very hard and difficult times so far. First of all, before I touch on some housekeeping rules, let me introduce the DE-CIX team behind this webinar. I will start with myself. Myself is Ivo Ivanov, CEO of DE-CIX International and CEO of DE-CIX Group, responsible for strategy and all markets around the globe. We do have with us in the team Thomas King, who is the CTO of DE-CIX. Thomas will give you more input on the DE-CIX continuity plan measures, but also some other key lessons related to our infrastructure and our actions we took to make sure our services stay resilient in these special times. We do have Chris Ditzel. Chris is Global Head of Product and Research in DE-CIX, and Chris will share with you details more in depth about the traffic stats we have seen and the trends we have seen on several DE-CIX markets around the globe, and also will touch on key assumptions and key, at least so far, analysis results for the future of interconnection and some implications on our services we might see in the future. I want to say thank you also to the guys behind the scenes. We do have Wolfgang Tremmel. You know him. Some of you know him from different webinars from the DE-CIX Academy. So Wolfgang is also part of this webinar team. We have Michael Vasseur and Andrea Habeland, part of our marketing team. So thank you all for making this possible. And now, before we jump into the different topics we want to share with you, I just want to have a brief comment on the housekeeping for this global DE-CIX webinar. For those of you who are not aware of this tool, it's pretty easy to be handled. Actually, on the right-hand side of your toolbar, you see the presenters, list of participants, the handout which can be downloaded, and also you can share in writing questions. By the way, some questions you might share in writing, they can be answered instantly by Wolfgang, especially, who is the moderator of the Q&A session. If you want to voice a question, this will be part of the section at the end of our presentation. The question and answer section will give you the opportunity to voice your questions, and we can have more interactive discussion on all topics. And we also want to listen to you guys to share with us your experience you have done so far in your countries, dealing with the infrastructure and the needs of your customers, and at the end of the day, of the users of the services. The session, last but not least, the session is recorded, it's video recorded, so everybody will have a chance to follow on the different content topics even later on, or share this with colleagues and co-workers. And now let's start with the content. We share a very special moment. As everybody is aware of, we do have a situation which is a situation valid for almost the entire planet. Almost in every single country on the globe, more or less, we see significant restriction. We do experience restrictions. We do experience a time where generations, our generation and even generations of our parents, they didn't have experience so far. So this challenging time created a lot of implications, even related to the daily life of people. The daily life of people has been extremely changed because of being physically isolated, entirely shut down. Businesses have been changed a lot because of the shutdown and the lockdown. This and the lockout, I think this at the same time led to the result that we see a huge changes related to our business and to the digital infrastructure and the digital services we all are involved in. Allow me to share some thoughts and some lessons or assumptions we do see as very valid today. In those special times, those hard times for billions of people around the globe, we see that the responsibility of our community, the responsibility for providing resilient, reliable, secure, and available high-quality digital infrastructure is extremely important one. We see a high demand for resilient infrastructure as the key answer to the backbone of economies, as a key answer to the needs of a daily life of people, disregarding if these needs are related to their business life or their private life. The needs which are related to education, to doing the homework for millions and billions of kids and students around the globe, but at the same time to make sure that the job of everybody continues to be done. The answer to a lot of this is digital infrastructure. At the same time, this is our mandate. This is the mandate to all of us being involved in this business to do everything possible we can do to serve the needs of the global community, the users everywhere, actually our civilization. Therefore, we at DE-CIX, we want to thank you all for working so hard on delivering resilient and available internet today. We believe this is important to be done everywhere for everybody and everything. We should think about the situation where different digital solutions wouldn't be available as they are available today. A lot of people will get lost in this situation. They will not be able to at least compensate parts of their life, stay tuned, connected with their co-workers, with their companies, with their families, with their relatives, with the beloved ones, and share experience and stay together, digitally connected, even given the fact that they are physically locked. So a big applause to the entire community, to everybody who is involved in this business from our side. We at our end believe that even more important is today to deliver the resilient, highly neutral, scalable and secure internet infrastructure and digital infrastructure everywhere. Just a very brief update. As you can see on the map, DE-CIX developed a lot of different platforms over the couple of years, and we see that these platforms are highly demanded today. We see there are 22 different markets covered by the services of DE-CIX. We got almost 2,000 networks connected, different access points in different data centers and access sites, a lot of carriers working with DE-CIX on serving interconnection needs of others who are not directly connected to the platforms, and a massive amount of capacity connected. This capacity has been heavily upgraded. You believe us, in the last couple of weeks. Thomas later on will give you more details on this. We can confirm that at the DE-CIX end, we have, as of today, a huge ecosystem already created around the globe, and this crisis showed us that this ecosystem must be developed further with your help, with your support and your engagement, because we see how important it is to localize services and be present literally everywhere and to serve the needs of people, not in crisis like ours. This time just show us the evidences of the obvious need for digital infrastructure. We look at the time after Corona, where this should be even more important because people has discovered the need of digitalization. Some key factors in the summary, because before I hand over to my colleagues, Thomas and Chris, some key facts summarized. We at DE-CIX, this is the summary of the DE-CIX COVID experience over the past couple of weeks. We saw an average increase of traffic of more than 50%. We do saw 8 different peak records of traffic on different DE-CIX markets, as you can see, in US, in Europe, and the Middle East and India. We see also, of course, a huge amount of adding more and more infrastructure needed to make sure that there is no congestion, at least at the gateways and at least at the layers we do have under our control. And we DE-CIX did the necessary and the needed on different markets to make sure, as a critical infrastructure, we get the allowance to continue our operations and to be able to provide the services without being restricted by the measurements a lot of countries have in place. Thomas will give you more details later on. Just in a summary, we want to give a special heritage for all providers of digital infrastructure, and as I can say, we want to summarize this as the internet now, even more than ever before, is needed everywhere, and is needed to be global, neutral, and universal. This is our common job, and we do our promise to this job. We need to do this job in the future with more automatization, with more self-services. It has to be more seamless, flexible, that upgrades and can be done at any time, everywhere, and congestions can be limited. We do see a huge awareness of the importance of digital infrastructure created already by the attention of everybody, by the attention of media. Let us use this awareness and to motivate more governments and more people around the globe to see the importance of digital infrastructure, support the development of neutral, highly available and distributed internet infrastructure everywhere, because this is important for people and businesses in a similar way. And we at DE-CIX believe that it's needed in the future to add more and more solutions covering the needs we just saw as obvious in these special times we all discover. So we are working on creating the next generation of services of interconnection, increasing the flavor of different needs on the market in terms of service offering. Chris will give you more ideas about this later on. And now I want to hand over to Thomas, who will, of course, talk more about the business continuity plan at DE-CIX and give you more outlook for 2020 on infrastructure and services. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo. Welcome also from my side. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Thomas King. I'm the CTO of DE-CIX. My team is responsible for running the production network worldwide with all the services on top of that. And in the next couple of slides, I want to quickly walk you through our business continuity plan, what we have prepared already, and you know, how we answer the challenges we all have faced. And yeah, let's directly jump into that. So the first topic I want to talk about is the business continuity plan as such. You know, we have prepared this business continuity plans for a long time because we are ISO 27001 certified for a couple of years already, and so it you know, when the whole thing started, it was easy for us to just you know, put out our business continuity plans, adapt them to the situation as it was developing, and then you know, take it from there. So you know, the 25 years of experience we have as a company helped us definitely to make this very smooth for all of us. And you know, if you look at our infrastructure, currently we run it with less than 63% of usage, which allows us to easily provide you with more capacity if needed. And at the same time, it's very easy for us to add additional capacity on a very short-term basis if needed. So we are pretty sure that we are, you know, prepared for whatever traffic peaks we might see in the next couple of weeks. Or also months based on the corona situation. On the next slide, I can I can show you what we have done in terms of processes and stuff to make it even more easy for you guys to rely on our infrastructure. So we have introduced the second shift for our customer service team. That was already planned for quite some time, but we then decided to make this shift available right now, because there was a high demand on additional capacity, and we wanted to make sure that the provisioning of the services can be done in a very short time frame. So we introduced that. And of course, our customer service team, as usual, is available in emergency cases for troubleshooting on this kind of incidents 24/7 for you if you need them. There is a on-call duty, and the engineer will pick up your call or call you back in a couple of minutes if there's something very urgent. As you know, we have invested a lot in our automation systems. So our DE-CIX global interconnection infrastructure is highly automated. You have probably heard of our robots we have introduced 2 years ago. They allow us, for instance, to do the connecting of the fibers, so the cross connects within the data centers automatically without having somebody from our side on site. So the robots just do the work, and the good thing is they can do it in the middle of the night without accessing a data center. So that makes sure that even if the access to data centers will be limited, we can provision cross connects. We have sent all of our staff, or nearly all of our staff, home. So they are working from home. Nobody is in the office except a very small number of people. There is the NOC team, or part of the NOC team. They are on a rotation and they work out of the office. So if there is an issue with which needs to have somebody of us in the data center, they can easily go there. But it's a very limited number of people. It's actually, at the moment, we're on a 3-people shift, being in the office. And so far it works very well for us, and I hope for you experience it there. On the next slide, I want to quickly talk about how we stay in touch with our partners and institutions. So as you know, we are relying heavily on partners to from the data center side, for instance, for connecting you to our infrastructure, and also on carrier services. And of course, our hardware vendors provide us with delivery, and also for our builds outs, we need additional hardware. And so far it works very well. So we are in permanent contact with the guys. Of course, there are hiccups here and there, but overall, that's very reliable, and for us, it works quite good. I hope you can feel that as a customer as well. As DE-CIX is treated as critical infrastructure in all of the countries where we have operations nowadays, that helped also us, making sure that we can access data centers and have a priority when we talk to our partners like carriers and hardware vendors. And of course, we are in constant contact with the different local authorities, making sure that whatever change of policy may come up, we are aware, and we can still make sure that the infrastructure is available and reliable for you. So on the next slide, I want to quickly show you what we have done recently on our infrastructure. And this looks like a very boring table, but I just want to select two lines here. One is in New York. We have upgraded our infrastructure in New York heavily. You have probably seen that during the last couple of months. There were a lot of maintenance windows where we introduced new hardware and upgraded our backbone and our metro network in New York heavily. So we have overall increased the capacity by more than 12 times. And we also added new DE-CIX enabled sites, so where DE-CIX has their own infrastructure in data centers, we added 2 additional data centers. And if you look at the table, we did more or less the same thing at mainly all of our locations. And just let me highlight the Frankfurt location as well, as it is a very dominant one. In Frankfurt, we have just introduced new switches which allow to connect 576 times 100 GE access ports for customers. So that's a huge number of access ports, and this allows us, whatever capacity demands you guys have, we are prepared to serve them. And in Frankfurt we are growing also. We have introduced 3 new DE-CIX-enabled sites, this picture shows you also that we are growing in all of our locations, and this is something that will stay, and we will continue doing so. On the next slide, I want to quickly introduce you to the new build-outs we are currently doing in terms of new locations where we're working. In India, we have deployed Delhi and Kolkata and Chennai recently. So if you want to connect there, we have now operations there, so we are happy to provide a capacity there. And our Malaysia and Singapore deployments are now a little bit delayed due to the Corona situation. However, we are currently working on getting this networks up and running, and we will definitely be happy talking with you about having capacity there as well. So that's the current setup. Let me also show you on the next slide that we have connected nearly all of our locations so far where we have operations. So we recently introduced a connection between Madrid and Marseille. So if you want to use remote peering or cloud services from Frankfurt in, let's say, Madrid, then that's easily doable nowadays. And we have also directly connected Madrid to Frankfurt for delay reasons, so that we can provide you the best link with the lowest delay. That's especially important if you do peering or dedicated cloud connectivity. We have also connected Dubai to Marseille, which allows us to provide cloud services also in Dubai coming out of Frankfurt. And we are currently working on connecting Dallas to New York. So for remote peering and cloud services, it's exactly the same story. And we see a lot of demand in this area. So, we are building out as needed. We run a very stable and reliable network based on MPLS and VPLS, especially for our peering setups. But we have seen that, especially in Frankfurt, that this network has grown so hugely that we need to improve it a bit. And we have worked closely with Nokia and the IETF to come up with what we call internally Peering LAN 2.0. Because it will, provide some very nice features, which makes interconnection, especially provisioning of interconnection services and peering services, very smooth and easy for you as a customer. So it's even easier for you to connect to DE-CIX, but also for us internally. We will talk about that, during the second half of this year. Actually, it was planned to roll it out in summer, but due to the Corona situation, we decided that we want to focus for the moment on the stability of the network. So we delayed a few software upgrades on our routers, which were needed to deploy Peering LAN 2.0, just to make the network as stable and as reliable for you as possible. However, we still work on this, and we will throughout the next couple of weeks and months. So I guess in the second half of this year, we will introduce Peering LAN 2.0, and we will hear back from us on this topic. But the good thing is, it comes with additional advantages for you, but there is, from my point of view, of what I have heard with the customers we have talked about this so far, no disadvantage. So stay tuned, and I think it's something really cool that's coming up. On the next slide, I just want to give an outlook what else is coming throughout 2020. As you know, we have been working heavily on the IX API. DE-CIX has introduced their own API, which we call DE-CIX API, based on the IX API. And the IX API is something we have started together with Untitled and Links, mainly for the peering so far. It's a provisioning API. But as DE-CIX is also a cloud exchange, it is very important for us to provide features within the IX API that are able to handle direct cloud and virtual PNI. And this is something we are pushing very hard, and we expect the release of the IX API and also the implementation within DE-CIX for direct cloud and virtual PNI in Q2 and Q3 this year. So there's a lot of development in the API area. And as the API is a building block for our DE-CIX portal, we are now making sure that all the features that are available within the API will also be available in the portal as a self-service feature, so that you can easily, request a new service, configure the new service, or also cancel a new service, existing service, as you go, and make it very convenient for you to set up whatever you want and the way you want it. Of course, the sales guys will be available for you, and the customer service team is also available for you if you want to directly interact with them. But we also want to make sure at the same time that there's another way of getting in touch with us and consuming services from us, and that's the DE-CIX portal. We will release it throughout this year, so I'm pretty sure we will see the first release of this in summer this year, and then later on we will have regular releases of additional features within the DE-CIX portal. So that's pretty much from my side. To summarize what I just showed you, on the infrastructure side, given the Corona situation, it is business as usual. Of course, sometimes things are a little bit delayed, but it's in our experience to a very limited extent. So it feels like business as usual so far, and we see a lot of capacity upgrades and demand from you guys. So please, bring it on. We make sure we can deliver as quickly as possible. And on the same side, we can also show you that we are working on improving the infrastructure and coming up with new services as much as possible throughout 2020. And I think that's at the moment from my side. I want to hand over to Chris, who will show you a few changes in our global interconnection ecosystem and what Corona did to all of us.
So very warm welcome also from my side. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, indeed. Welcome to my home. I hope you doing all well at your homes. And I'd like to talk a bit about what we're seeing, whether this is a signal of a short-term change we are actually experiencing, or if it's something that will last over this crisis in the future. So on the next slide, I actually prepared the general hits and shifts. So I try to summarize what we've seen before and what we see since the crisis, just to think a bit about what we might to even see after the crisis. So the general setting for us, as well as for you running and operating networks, is we see a certain decrease in peak traffic as well as average traffic per year. So for bigger saturated exchanges such as Frankfurt, we see a steady 10% growth, which is of course a huge number if you look at the number of gigabits. And at smaller locations, it's actually something around 50%. So it's different everywhere. But during this crisis, and particularly since the lockdown situations, we see 10 to 50% average increased traffic within days. So just a few days, and the traffic peaked up everywhere, all over the place. So, and the steady growth and new peaks, usually we experience them in fall and winter. So most likely because people don't enjoy the sun anymore. Sometimes it's a bit corresponding to live events, updates, or software releases. However, the new peaks we observed really closely correlate with the real lockdown situation. So we see the Frankfurt peak correlates with the Frankfurt or the Germany lockdown. The Madrid peak correlates with this lockdown. And in the US, which is a bit behind, fortunately, so it got a bit more time to prepare, we see the peaks are just coming in like within the time of the lockdowns of New York, for instance. So while we usually see a very stable distribution of traffic and applications, in this extreme situation, we basically see certain traffic types really exploding and really growing really fast. And usually we also see diurnal cycles, which means very slow growth in the early morning, then in the morning steady growth, a small lunch break, and then a rise over the afternoon to the evening, where we will see a decline and a low at night. So actually currently we're seeing exactly the same thing, but just much higher. So the growth in the morning is much higher, up to 20%, and it appears that people, at least in Europe, stay up longer. Maybe due to the lockdown, they don't have to go to work. So we see even a lot of traffic and still a lot of growth, in particularly at the night times, even after midnight compared to before the crisis. So just because I'm a research and products guy, I like some numbers, and therefore I hope you enjoy that as well. So I like to dig a bit into Frankfurt statistics. So on the next slide, we actually prepared the Frankfurt situation and have different views on it. The first plot we are seeing is actually the traffic volume in Frankfurt. So it's the general statistic, just a nicer way. So we plot the averages per hour over the day. So you see in the gray background, you actually see the daily, the diurnal cycles, and you see red max traffic. The orange one is the average traffic, and green is the low traffic. And we see actually a 10% rise in average and peak traffic, very well correlated to the lockdown, as I said. So this is not so much surprising, even though I'm very interested in what you guys experience in your network. So if we look at the next plot, we actually see collaborative working by volume. So therefore, we focused on different applications and try to classify the traffic according to those. And what we're seeing is basically, even before the crisis, we see that during the work weeks, there's a lot more traffic. And on the weekends, people tend to not work as much and don't use those tools. And now we see, in general, a 100% increase just within 2 weeks. And we see that this pattern spike during the weeks. However, if we focus on the last plot on this page, which is a particular gaming provider by volume, we see that actually we have the same patterns, just a bit the opposite, because gaming apparently happens mostly at the weekend, and this gaming provider focuses on gaming services for particularly young people. And the change since the Corona crisis apparently is that they don't have weekdays anymore, so sort of always weekend, even though in Germany they do homeschooling, but it appears that they still got more time to play games as well. So we see that really it depends on the application, how the traffic pattern is changing, but we see big growth. So just for transparency, we also like to look at the Madrid case. On the next slide, I prepared very similar plots, but very different. So they appear on the first glance very similar, but they are not. Basically, what we did is we looked at the number of users. So actually, we're really looking at unique observed IP addresses. And as we see in Madrid, we see, if we call it by users, we see a 20% increase, just very well correlated with the lockdown for the peak traffic and the average daily traffic. So if we look again at the collaborative working by users, we see that it's actually 5 times higher than before the crisis. And we see a very, very steep growth in Madrid, as there was a very strict lockdown, like from a certain point in time. Then if we focus on video on demand by users, we see the number of video of demand users doubled. And we see that actually before you could see some peaks in the traffic at the weekends, we still observe those peaks, but in general on a much, much higher level. So if we look at all those significant changes and ask us, okay, but what's the situation right now? Because why we have it now is obvious, and I'm sure you're seeing the same, but what are the long-term implications? And on the next slide, I actually really summarize a bit what we see in the short term. It's basically a relief, right? So internet backbone can absorb fast growing demand, even for different applications. We did a good job in building the internet, and particularly you did a very good job in building a stable connections and really being able to serve the customers. But with the incremental capacity we are deploying, we also see that a bit the traffic flows are changing. And if we focus at the extreme peaks of some applications, we should ask ourselves, and that's a bit like from my research perspective, that might be a glimpse into the future, because what we're seeing now is that a lot of companies send their people home and they're working from home, not from their offices, not from the enterprise premises anymore, maybe some even sitting outside using a mobile connection. So we see a much higher distribution of the sort of traffic sources or traffic destinations. And even if they talk just to the same services online or to the same cloud providers, the traffic is much more distributed. So that's what we're seeing at DE-CIX. And that, if we think about the digital transformation of our society, I believe this is a bit of the development we would have potentially seen over the next 3 to 5 years. We just see squeezed in just a few weeks. So who actually facilitated the change of remote working? Was it the CEO, the CTO, or was it Corona? It could really be that this is a change that will last, and we need to prepare the networks for it. And I believe it's to some extent also a fundamental change. So on the next slide, I actually try to capture this aspect a bit. And here we see like the traditional setup, how it could look like. And for the sake of my argument, we just think that we need more direct interconnections. I know that like the very huge networks do that already for the majority of the traffic. However, given the higher distribution, and particularly in the long tail, and we just imagine that from traditional premise enterprise, the user switch to mobile, switch to home, we have a way higher complexity of interconnection, because I believe if there is a regional network, it was never designed to serve hundreds of people working with Office 365, which is hosted in the cloud, because usually maybe 1 or 2 people are really using those workloads after work at home or maybe in their free time, but the heavy traffic is generated from enterprise premises or through dedicated lines. So we actually got used to this pattern. So on the next part here, I try to show not that actually the in the next figure, basically not really showing that the IXP will substitute the internet, but that we can deliver much more than we're actually doing today. Peering is great, and I believe peering is helping a lot of ISPs, but we also need to think about better guarantees, end-to-end guarantees. And I know that actually a lot of people wanted to do quality of service over inter-domain boundaries, and that there were a lot of incentives and initiatives to follow this path. However, currently we're working very close with some huge cloud providers, and particularly also Microsoft as a cloud provider, to enable software as a service platforms being very tightly interconnected with a wide range of networks. Not the big networks which have perfect interconnects to Microsoft anyway, but we're talking a lot about enterprises, about regional networks, and we really need to rethink the platform we are building and trying to shape it in a way so that we can really security and resilience and guarantees, and particularly the resilience guarantees are needed for today. That said, actually, this is a bit the outlook in which we're thinking in terms of products and having, yeah, as I said, special platforms, special new products. I'd like to hand over to Ivo, who is also talking to you about the future or what's happening after the crisis.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Thomas. And I hope all of you attending the global webinar now got a bit better perspective on what DE-CIX does and has achieved over the last couple of weeks in terms of delivering resilient and reliable infrastructure. But let me build on further with what Chris mentioned at the end of his presentation, which is extremely important for the time after the crisis. In times of crisis, we have to prepare for the time after crisis, and let's together think through it. What we do see is a much higher awareness and acceptance of the importance of digital infrastructure to our daily life as private individuals or as business people, for the daily life of companies, for the daily life of schools, universities, daily life of the entire society. We see digitalization is everywhere, and now this time of crisis just showed us in a very comprehended time, just a kind of a compression of couple of weeks only, how important digital answers are to different business models and to our behavior, especially in times of crisis. We also saw that digital is on top of the physical and not instead of. We believe that this should be used as a key lesson learned to rethink a kind of a new deal for interconnection and infrastructure for the next decade. Now we are in 2020, the beginning of a new decade. Unfortunately, this decade started with very difficult time for all of us everywhere, and everywhere the answer has been digital to a lot of challenges, and a lot of questions people had disregarding if it's education, healthcare, business, or private life. We believe that these answers should be taken as one of the key lessons learned, and we should develop and build on these answers for the future, the time after Corona, where we'll deliver and the same type of commitment to digital infrastructure, but we'll add more and more services, which will enable more and more applications, the resilience of these applications for different situations in our daily private and business life. We believe that getting closer to the edge, delivering more infrastructure, access on the last mile, disregarding if it's fiber or satellite or it's 5G, it has to be there. We have to make the infrastructure in general very, very scalable. And we need more applications on the best and the most direct way possible. As Chris mentioned, the direct way possible will be the right way. Therefore, we at DE-CIX, we started actually years back working already on solutions. Now we have been justified with a couple of weeks how important these solutions became solutions for different type of participants, already solutions related to cloud connectivity, but also to enterprises. And let me share one personal experience. I got on the phone talking to representatives of Fortune 500 companies these days. The one guy even said, oh, I have asked my teams to use analog telephones to make sure that we stay together and that we can communicate. I believe this is a lack of trust because of the past. These days, they proved that digital infrastructure can already deliver a very resilient and very reliable answer. So we have to build on this further, and let's make sure that nobody will ask in the future about analog telephones. We can do this for private fun, but I believe the right answers to business and private, the right answers to the future is digital, and digital infrastructure operators, they can deliver. I think everybody who is in this global chat room agrees with me, and we believe that this delivery of services should be done very easy, should be done in a very neutral, distributed way, should be done everywhere with a cool solutions, seamless way of provisioning, seamless way of controlling the network traffic flow, network management, and very scalable and super flexible, as Thomas touched on this previously, talking about the API and the portal. We believe in this. We believe that we all as community, we have it in our hands to start a new golden age for interconnection after we have solved these very, very difficult times for all of us. Learning out of those times and following on the trends which we believe will not be returned anymore. Digital is everywhere, will be everywhere even more. And now I want to hand over to all of you. This means our questions and answer session now begins. It's a very easy way to communicate now live, to make it more interactive. We want to have this discussion with you. So just a quick manual on this. On the right hand side, you see this raise your hand button. So you can talk directly to the entire audience, where Wolfgang Tremmel, now Wolfgang is, will be also visible to all of you. He will moderate this question and answer session. So please follow his advices as well. Of course, you can also use the writing way, and you can type in your question. So this will be also addressed to the presenters and to the entire audience. So thank you for listening so far. Now we are happy to get into a more virtual and active way of discussing things. So the audience and the floor is now open to the questions and answers section.
Thank you, Ivo. I have first a couple of written questions. The first one is from David Ferracanosa. What does DE-CIX think about the EU request to Netflix, YouTube, etc. to limit their streaming services to avoid network collapses for Corona situation?
We DE-CIX believe that this is something the European Commission did for probably reasons of not having a full picture on infrastructure development. At the same time, having this type of request, we believe is extremely important to think why institutions like the European Commission try to provide this kind of recommendations or advices or asking single companies to change the quality on their services. We believe that especially politicians should focus more on developing a proper framework for more and more support on the last mile, where we do see a significant lack of further infrastructure development because of significant support from the public sector, because of significant and attractive framework for building up. I think this is will be in the future a much better answer to avoiding congestion in times where we will see, even without crisis, a higher demand for digital services and solutions, and this should be actually the focus of institutions, especially the European Commission, to create the proper policies and frameworks in Europe, but also to others, governments and organizations being involved in policy making for digitalization.
Okay, the next question is from Hunter Newby. He asks, could business applications such as Zoom, GoToWebinar, Microsoft Teams, etc. all be considered gaming apps now, the game of business online? And do the business game apps get priority over the entertainment game apps?
Chris, you talked about this type of services, so I want to hand over the question to you. Chris? At least I cannot hear him.
I guess he's on mute.
Okay.
My bad. Sorry.
Now you're on.
Yes, I'm seeing where you're going actually. So the beginning of the question is not meant that serious. You're touching a bit the net neutrality discussions. Well, we believe if you just build infrastructure in a way so that you can cope with any traffic, and I believe we gave a great example that the explosion in traffic during these days didn't really harm our infrastructure, and we were able to deliver our customers. And I believe a lot of the networks out there were able to deliver a very, very good service without any restrictions. And I believe it's at this point not really the discussion what we should prioritize, but that we should put infrastructure in place that is able to cope even in special situations with the customer demand.
Thank you. Next question is from Diego Teot. Diego, you have the microphone.
Yeah, thank you. Just seeing all the issues with Microsoft Teams, the gaming question before, Ivo, because this one is more, let's say, a political question. Do you believe that all the issues we faced with internet, because we faced issues in this day for internet, will be the perfect excuse to put on the table again the net neutrality, and as the previous questioner asked, to privilege business or application deemed critical versus other applications?
I hope not. I hope not that this should be an excuse. Actually, it should, the situation and the challenges you mentioned also in some regions and with some services have been produced by a lack of last mile infrastructure to a very high degree of coverage of a lot of regions. And the proper framework for motivating the industries to enable more and more infrastructure, like support on building faster data centers, support on the building faster fiber to the home networks, moving faster with some licensing on the 5G sector, also allowing new business models like the LEO satellite sector for moving faster forward from the regulatory perspective. I think these are more the areas where the politicians and policymakers should focus on to enable proper framework for investments, higher investments, and faster actions on developing more and a resilient infrastructure everywhere, not in the urban hubs today only, but literally everywhere. This should be the solution. Then if the pipe is big enough everywhere, there is no need to prioritize.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. I have one question from Isam Fayyad. He asks, is DE-CIX consider expansion to Africa in the near future?
Thank you for this question. Define near future, and then I can answer this precisely. DE-CIX is already active in Africa. We have been helping and collaborating with some partners already. As you know, we do have a collaboration with Angola Cables on the west coast of Africa in Angola. We also signed a collaboration agreement with the Nigeria Community Internet Exchange, where we agreed to help them with technical know-how exchange and process know-how exchange. We also are very carefully examining the changes of business models, the developments on the data center side, but also the changes of how the traffic regime will be developed more in the future, giving new sea cable systems coming up in the south of the Atlantic, as well also on the trans Asia to through Middle East to Europe side, involving the east coast of Africa. We are aware of the importance of the African continent, and we certainly plan to get more and more involved in even more direct actions following these new trends. What we have achieved in the last couple of years, and this shows us the direction DE-CIX took towards south, is we built the hubs in Madrid, the hubs in Marseille, the hubs in Palermo. Palermo and Marseille, they are already the new kind of pre-doors to Africa for a lot of traffic related to North African countries and the east coast of Africa. At the same time, Madrid, but especially Lisbon, where we opened the platform, are also entry points and gateways for West African and some South African traffic, avoiding higher latency and a traffic loop over London. So this now can be done entirely in the south of Europe, when we do see also bigger content and content delivery networks, cloud service providers, especially the hyperscalers, starting building up their presences in the south of Europe. We see this as a pre-phase of being more and more present physically in the next years on the African continent itself. We will follow this trend. We'll start even motivating next steps on this trend. So the question is, yes, how fast this will happen, I cannot answer today, but I think sooner than we believe as of today.
Thank you. I have a question from Khaled Zedrak. Just a second. Khaled, you have the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's quite valuable, the information that we are hearing, so I'm not going to comment on that. It's nothing unusual of DE-CIX and the quality of the presentation and the underlying information. Thank you for sharing all that information. My question to you, gentlemen, how do you see the emerging new hot points on the global scale, on the geographical points, on the traffic route between Asia and Europe? Do you see any emerging points coming out now, like, for example, Oman, or like Israel, or like Egypt, where you think that there might be the new points for exchanging data? It's quite, it sounds very logical that these middle points should be the points where data would be exchanged, or maybe even Djibouti as well. How do you see this emerging, and what do you think this could create in terms of impact on the global exchange of traffic and reducing latency and increasing the efficiency of networks around the world, not only in the Corona time, but even in the future? And thank you again.
Who would like to answer?
I cannot see Ivo moving on the video, but it's actually a question for Ivo. So Ivo, are you still with us? Doesn't look like.
Seems Ivo's video is frozen.
Yeah, the video is frozen for the moment. But actually, it's all of you. How do you see these emerging points, physical points, as potentially good locations for exchanging traffic at a much efficient way, rather than having to travel all the way to Marseille or even sometimes to Frankfurt and London for exchanging this traffic?
So let me quickly answer on that. So of course we see that there are, the markets are developing in these areas in the world, and you probably have seen our announcement, and I just covered that the presentation as well about our developments in Malaysia and Singapore, and that's a clear sign that we see this kind of hotspots coming up, and that traffic, needs to be peered locally. And this is why we go into these regions. And as Ivo is back, it's probably good that he, adds a little bit more on that. Ivo, did you get the question already? Okay, it looks like Ivo was here.
Still Sterling.
We lost him again.
I think we lost Ivo.
Maybe we can add to this note that it's always important also for an internet exchange to have a local reach. So you need to have some huge population, or you need to have some people who also consume internet traffic. So just build something halfway, doesn't really matter if it's Asia or where it is. We also need to have if you want to build an ecosystem, you need to have a local population. That I'd add to what Thomas said.
Thank you. And if you can comment also on the open access and neutrality, how do you see this really impacting the ability of an exchange to be really adding value to the different participants here, rather than the traditional models that are not necessarily open and inclusive?
So, DE-CIX is a data center and carrier neutral. So neutrality is a very important thing for us, and which also means accessing open the infrastructure is important, because we have seen that this kind of development drives, IXPs and interconnection, and that develops hotspots and grow them even bigger. And then you see that network effect kicks in and makes then hotspots really huge, like Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, or also in the US, or Hong Kong, and all over the place. We see that kind of development. So from my point of view, to make that successful, it's crucial to have a neutral environment, which easy to access, and that's if that's missing, this kind of hotspots are hard to develop. But Ivo is back, so probably Ivo can also add some on.
Thank you, and I hope now you can see and hear me properly. Is this the case?
This is the case.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, and sorry for this. Just I already listened to what Chris and Thomas explained. Just want to add one more thought. I gave the example of the south of Europe, but just the same quality is valid for the Middle East, where just 8 years back there was no one internet exchange. Now we see with the UAE-CIX in Dubai, operated by DE-CIX, what has been achieved. There is a new international hub for this region, and I certainly believe this region needs more hubs, and more hubs will appear there. You mentioned Oman. I believe Egypt has a great opportunity, of course, to be on the map, to appear on the map as the next global hub, not only regional by population, but one element is key. The framework should be the right one. We have seen that different markets, they do function in different way, but they have a couple of key criteria in common, and one key criteria is the regulatory framework. It should be business friendly, interconnection friendly, and the other one is of course geographic and of course population driven and content driven one. I think a country like Egypt, just to stay closer to your question, fulfills the population wise criteria, the geographic criteria. I think there are a couple of more I would say duties to be completed on the regulatory and access side.
Okay, thank you, Ivo. I have a couple of more attendees are all asking about expansion to South America, Latin America. Perhaps you can quickly comment on that.
I had on my first no, I think third or second slide the global map of DE-CIX. The global map of DE-CIX does not cover today LATAM, is a white spot on the map, and normally we as DE-CIX we do not like white spots. This is my answer as of now.
Okay, thank you, Ivo. I have another question. This one is for Chris. Or let me just do, where did I get it? Yes, the question was from Daniel Fried, and the question is, during the first week of the lockdown, we saw a huge increase in traffic that went down the next weeks. Do you know what kind of traffic, like video on demand or gaming, was the one initially increased and then went down? Do you have an idea why this initial increase and subsequent decrease occurred?
Yeah, so I can't really say in the particular case, but what I've observed at different of our locations is that actually some of the networks did some new or build out capacities at some places, and what we also saw is that CDN traffic spiked up, like because CDNs like to use IXPs even more in high demand cases. And over time, they start to reorganize things. The networks try to optimize and see where the traffic is coming from, and maybe do some traffic engineering to optimize traffic flows. So that's, I believe, simply in most cases a reaction of the networks to the increasing demand, and not so much that the users stopped using services.
Thank you, Chris. Another question regarding, this is from Antonio Nuenes or from Samuel Cavallo, I'm not really sure. Do you think operators should start working in more disruptive IP transit and peering products to have more efficient interconnection routes to address future niche needs, as the regular market seems to be quite delayed in thinking on new solutions? I think that goes for Thomas.
I guess it goes to all of us, but yeah, you know, I'm a big supporter in having clever and smart products that help reaching out to customers and, you know, providing smart solutions for their end customers. So yeah, definitely think about how we can support this kind of interconnection. And you know, if there's a niche market not well served, then definitely we should come up with something. And yeah, so I'm a big supporter of that.
Yeah, maybe from the product side. So just approach me if you have more precise ideas, if you have any thoughts, if you have anything that you think the IXP could potentially deliver, does not today, reach out. We're more than happy to discuss. Myself, Thomas, just reach out to us. Usually we are at some of the global events. Currently we are obviously not, but our mailbox is always happy about requests or chats or something like this.
Let me add one thought on this, which is valid for actually what we have said earlier about the future of services. Actually, this is exactly what we want to achieve. We want to achieve that we support the different trends on the market, which are obviously trends.
Oh, Ivo, we cannot hear you anymore. Probably makes sense if you switch off video.
It's every single network operator, disregarding the size or the business model, sees. These are trends which products like the IP transit is to a very high
Ivo, we cannot hear you.
Very
okay. Seems Ivo,
the connection.
Ivo has a bad connection. Ivo, we cannot hear you. Okay, another question regarding perhaps Thomas can answer that. Are you seeing an increase of interest in connecting to IXPs after the coronavirus situation? This comes from Julio Sirota.
So in general, we see an increase in capacity on different levels. So from existing customer, and also we see an increase on potential new customers. We have a lot of inquiries in this direction, yeah. So as you probably have seen it from the numbers Chris just showed, that there's more. There's a bad noise on my side. I'm not sure if that's something you hear as well. But anyway, let me answer your question. So the numbers Chris just showed show that digital infrastructure is getting more and more important, especially during the Corona crisis. And so all the companies who needed a better solution reached out to us, and I think our sales guys are quite busy at the moment, getting in contact with potential new customers or existing customers, and we are happy to serve them because we want to be available whenever somebody is needing a new connection.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any more questions from the audience? I see there is quite a still number of written questions, and we will follow up on all of them in writing tomorrow or in the next few days. Ivo, do you want to give some closing? Well, Thomas, perhaps will you give some closing remarks? Ivo has a bad connection.
I got two questions about the connection we are building between Dallas and New York. Just let me point out that this service will be available soon, so we are already working on it, getting it up and running. So whenever you have a business demand for that, just reach out to us, and we can definitely serve it. Currently, I cannot promise you when the FS will be because of the Corona thing. Everything is a little bit delayed, but I'm pretty sure in the next couple of weeks that the service will be available. So just let us know if you need to have connectivity between Dallas and New York, also then reaching our network from Dallas or New York globally.
Okay.
Maybe you closing remarks. Should we just, as Ivo looks like the connection is very bad. If you mind, I move on. And so thank you very much for all of you who joined this webinar. We are really impressed by the large number of people who showed up. So thank you for all your time and questions. That was very helpful for us. Also getting an understanding how the situation is at your side and what kind of questions are you driving. So thanks again. Let's stay in touch, and whenever you have something you want to reach out, just let us know. We are more than happy to help you guys. Thank you very much. And yeah, so this is the DE-CIX team, on the last slide. Please let us know if we can help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also from my side, has been
just a couple of years already with the cloud exchange, with the.
Oh, this is weird. But anyway, so thank you very much. I think we can close this. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe. And
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ivo, can you hear me?
Hörst du uns?
Ja.